Girija, maybe you'd start with what are your views on this data that we have that India's female labor force participation was 18.6% in 2019, with a significant proportion currently engaged in the unorganized sector. So we know that this is really low compared to other similar countries. And then in Bihar, it's as low as 9%. So, what are some of the underlying factors that affect women's reluctance or inability to enter workforce, and that should be addressed as an economic priority? If you can speak to that, and also whether your perspective can be both what are some of these issues and what has happened post COVID.
Thank you so much, Priya, and thanks to IGC for organizing this panel and also inviting me. I really appreciate it. This is such an important issue. So Priya has already laid out that India has very low female labor force participation rates relative to the rest of the world. But just to give you a sense, globally, 1 out of every 2 adult women participates in the labor force compared to about 3 out of 4 men. And India is pretty much, the same as per the global average for men, where 3 out of 4 men are working in India. But for women, it's actually 1 out of 5 women. So India is behind in female labor force participation rates, not just relative to the rest of the world, but also actually within South Asia, it has one of the lowest rates of female labor force participation. And also, I think, we can all agree that women's participation in the labor force is an outcome that we should be, we are all interested in itself. It's an end in itself because it leads to greater autonomy for women and, sort of letting them achieve their potential in the labor force because of this participation. But also, it is a means to an end, in that we see that, women who have greater autonomy and greater decision-making power and sort of the concomitant bargaining power in the household can affect equality in many other domains, such as access to healthcare, better child outcomes. So we do know from the existing research that there are many potential reasons for why we see low labor force participation by women, and so there's a whole plethora of reasons. So these range from expectations for women and also the requirement for them to do bulk of the housework and childcare. And this is a norm that is prevalent in both developed and developing countries. So this is sort of affecting women globally. And because of this, women have fewer working hours, they have greater cognitive load, they require greater flexibility in the workforce, and all of these limit the opportunities that women can potentially access, and also their ability to search for work. Then there's other reasons like, which is relevant for Bihar, for example, the sectoral structure of employment. It's possible that, there is just a mismatch in the sectors in which women want to work and the sectors that are actually looking for women. So even if women want to work, there's just not opportunities in the economy for them to find such jobs, which then leads to, lower female labor force participation. My work, and this is what I want to focus on today, is one major possible barrier for women, which is street harassment, or the harassment that women face in public spaces, which can hold back women at many stages of their life, and sort of has the potential to wipe out a lot of the investments that are made in women at early stages, from childhood to adulthood. So India is ranked as one of the most dangerous countries for women to be in by a recent study by Thomson Reuters Foundation. And women have been reported to actively take precautions to avoid feeling unsafe. So there's approximately 84% of women in cities in India that are aged 40 years or younger that say that they actively avoid certain parts of the city to feel safer, to avoid harassment or the fear of it. So it doesn't necessarily need to be incidents, but just the perceived safety. So if they perceive areas as being unsafe, then they choose not to go there. So in my research, I find that women in Delhi, college-going women in Delhi, are willing to choose, are willing to go from a top 20% college to a bottom 50% college, just to sort of feel safer while traveling. And they're also willing to pay almost 18,000 rupees per annum, which is 2 times the annual tuition in Delhi University, which is where the study is based. So these are huge sort of costs that women are willing to incur to feel safe, just to travel to college. And this is the top university. I mean, Delhi University is one of the most prestigious universities in India. So these are, high achieving women in a top university that are willing to make these trade-offs. So one can only imagine that, what are women who have not even, entered college education are willing to do to feel safer, and change their choices because of the fear of harassment. There's also other pieces of work from India, which by Chakrabarti and Siddiqui, that show strong negative correlation between perceived violence or crime and female employment in India. So then we know college education is affected by the fear of harassment. Women's entry into the labor force is affected by the fear of harassment or other safety concerns. But there's also evidence from the US, which looks at, but I think is highly relevant for India as well, which looks at the intensive margin, or the intensity with which women participate, or the hours that they're working and where they're working. So there's this recent work in the US with Uber drivers. So Uber is very special in that they offer the same wage rates to both men and women. And then based on this, we can rule out discrimination over wage rates. But if we look at the earnings, we still see that women Uber drivers are earning lesser than male Uber drivers. And one of the reasons where one of the driving forces for this is women choosing to drive in more safe areas or less dangerous areas, which in turn have where areas where there's greater danger are also areas where you earn more when you drive, and they're actively avoiding that. So we can see that safety is affecting how women study, where they work, how much they work, based on existing evidence. And as I said earlier, this is a serious barrier, and very disturbing, because it has the potential to literally wipe out the investments that are made in childhood and adulthood, where we see that women in Delhi, for example, are not only competing with men but actually beating men in class 12th exams. But then they're choosing to attend colleges that are lower quality and sort of wiping out all these gains that they've made. In terms of the second part of the question of, how has COVID affected these issues that women are facing, sort of sticking to the mobility challenge for women, the restrictions that have been placed as part of COVID in public spaces, especially public transport, have affected women particularly badly. So despite women making up a smaller share of travelers by public transport, so there's fewer women who you see. For example, on average in Delhi, we see about 1/3 of the travelers by bus are women. But when women travel, they are more dependent on public transport than men. So this is because of limited access to first private transport, also access to lower financial resources on average compared to men. And this combined with the fact that women are usually only travel during off-peak hours and trip chain or combine multiple tasks and destinations, we see that this reduced access to public transport has hit them very hard. Even if they want to travel, they do not have the opportunity to travel. And then these limitations have just amplified the negative effects of the pandemic that they face at home. I can maybe stop here.
So, Girija, before you kind of completely stop on this round, I just wanted you to, like, there is a question as to something very basic, like, what are the reasons women face sexual harassment in India? So, could you break it down? I mean, I think it's easy to say patriarchy, right? But could you help us understand why does this happen? Is this? It's quite a deep and pervasive phenomenon which is very high in South Asia, right? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So even though it's easy to say patriarchy, I think this does start at a very early stage, and everything. You mentioned that we are going to be focusing on the interventions, and everything that we can do in the short term is sort of reactive and not truly hitting where we need to. But yes, so there are many reasons why sexual harassment exists, and yes, it is a problem in South Asia, which is sort of the proportion is much higher. But if we look at a lot of rapidly urbanizing countries and cities, we see that this is a problem sort of across the globe. We know from Latin America that this is a problem in almost all major cities in Latin America as well, and we see similar sort of negative consequences on economic choices there. In terms of what I think is the main reason. I think it is deep-rooted patriarchal norms, where there is this sort of expectation that women have delineated roles and they should stick to them. And that is why we see that there is, we know from the domestic violence literature as well that there's this strong backlash effect from women's greater economic autonomy. We see that women entering in public spaces to study, to work, they face similar backlash. So for me, that is definitely the top reason. And also in terms of what we see has worked in changing in reducing violence or attitudes towards it, we see that starting early has the maximum effect.
Okay. And Girija, what are the sources where we collect data on sexual harassment that women face? And is that data available disaggregated by age and caste and some other categories, social vulnerability?
This is such a great point, Priya. I was recently reading this book called Invisible Women and the Data Bias. And this is one place where I think that is the first step: measurement, proper measurement of this problem. There is not much data. I mean, the biggest data source that we rely on is the NCRB, National Crime Records Bureau data, which only records, first of all, actual reported incidents. And if you look at those categories, they're very, very broad. We already know reporting is a problem. So when we go looking for data on harassment, we are dependent on these broad categories, which are made available to researchers like us or, people, almost everyone in this space at the district level, which doesn't tells us very little. And that is actual reported incidents. There is a lot. I mean, now that I'm working in other countries on this as well. India is sort of advanced in terms of recording perceived safety. So there's the amazing data by Safety Pin, which started very early in response to the Nirbhay rape case, recording audits on factors that we know feed into women's perceptions of safety. So that is amazing data that we at least have and does not even exist in other spaces. Those similar apps do exist, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that Safety Pin was a huge contribution to be able to get women's perceived data of perceived lack of safety. Just wanted to kind of emphasize something that Girija said, which was that women are willing to sacrifice like their wages, pay more and earn less to basically feel safer. And I think that's really important as we get deeper into the conversation around this.